Starting.
All right.
So, welcome to From Archives to Algorithm, How AI is Writing Business Memory podcast. Hi, my name is Zsofi Rafra, digital marketing and AI consultant. And in today's sophisticated episode, we dive into how intelligent automation is transforming the way business interact with their most valuable and often most overlooked asset, with their data. So I'm more than happy to welcome Brent Wesler, Vice President of Technology and Digital Automation at Vital Records Control. And today we are going to explore how AI is not just optimizing data workflows, but also reshaping business memory. Hi, Brent.
Hi, nice to have you. Thanks for having me.
Could you please introduce yourself and explain what makes you excited about your work every day?
Yeah, Brent Wesler, again, VP of Strategic Technology of Vital Records Control. We focus on document-based workflow automation. So we're really looking at very common, repeatable business processes that have a lot of bottlenecks as it relates to labor, primarily around data entry automation. And certainly AI is the big thing out there in our industry, and it's kind of taking it by storm. Obviously, the benefit to AI in my space is classification, separation, and extraction of documents. And that's really what we focus on.
As an enterprise software solution lead, you are transforming how business handle their most sensitive data. And what do you think? What is the biggest myth currently people still believe about records today?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly you have use cases in the US which differ from Europe and EMEA and the general world. Things like healthcare here, we have things like PHI and PI, private healthcare information, personal identifying information, and keeping that information in a secure repository is something that we've always offered. But as you get into higher complex compliance type situations like ITAR and FedRAMP compliance, again, which are for DoD manufacturers here in the US, you have a higher degree of isolation where the data needs to be stored. And then you have all the typical GDPR type stuff that's in the EU. And so maintaining the data, and primarily, again, we're document based, so we're all about maintaining the physical document more so than the data, but both kind of work together. So I foresee, we've been selling ECM since 1997, which is enterprise content management for highly compliant individuals, businesses, right? But in a lot of cases, the ERP or the accounts payable system, whatever the line of business system, is kind of cannibalize that business. So now you're seeing data and documents in a lot of cases be stored in things like SAP or Infor or whatever your line of business system is. And so that's what we're competing against now as workflow automation experts, where those silos of data that used to exist no longer, and they're kind of being collapsed into kind of a single content repository.
And currently, how are your clients evolving in their expectations? So are they still asking for access, or are they already asking for insights of their data? What do they want currently, or what is the trend?
Yeah, so a lot of our customers know what they want, and some obviously don't, and they rely on us more for the consultative approach, right? I think in terms of data and what projects we do, we're always looking at ways to remove labor from the equation. So whatever that looks like, in some cases, a lot of our products come with BI tools, business intelligence, kind of a step up from the typical reporting, where you can run all sorts of analysis based on the data. So for instance, we really focus on beverage distribution in the United States. Alcohol, beer, wine, spirits, and non-alcohol like water bottles and fruit juices and stuff are all sold through these state licensed distributors. And demand planning, which is essentially the concept of, hey, I'm coming into the summer months, I need to have this amount of inventory on within the building so we can sell it. This demand planning, which is it's taking the data, historical predictive data, and predicting essentially what you're going to sell, so that you can stock and sell items quicker. And so using things like BI tools and demand planning tools like Blue Ridge, where we integrate using robotic process automation, where they're sending us the POs that we're going to have to place with the vendors automatically based on our data over a period of years. So predictive, using historical data to predict future outcomes is something that I think we're going to see a lot more of.
And when it comes to predictions, normally marketing people are working with predictions and predictive data. And where do you see where marketing and technology work super close together? And where do you see this collaboration happening between both teams when it comes to intelligent data and intelligent data workflows?
Yeah, I mean so we do that now. I mean, Hannah handles a lot of our marketing and the ability to do things like multi-touch campaigns where, if somebody opens or using something like a Yesware or a Salesforce to track who opened, how many clicks, and use a multi-channel strategy to, really automate the marketing, right? So if somebody's clicking on your emails, they're going to get a different email downstream or even a call, right, which gets loaded into the CRM system for a BDR to now reach out, versus someone that doesn't interact. They're getting a nurturing campaign, maybe a 3-touch nurturing campaign that the content's quite a bit different. So certainly the marketing journey, and you see things like Freshworks, which we use a portion of their support system, but they have a Fresh marketing and Fresh sales, which has all of the typical like rules-based marketing outbound type lead generation strategies. And I mean, Salesforce has it too, but you can create these essentially engines that run, and it can use predictive, hey, this person clicked, they've clicked a number of times on this type of content, so we can send this other type of content to them. Or again, if they haven't clicked, or if there is a level of engagement, meaning they're forwarding the email message to someone else, right? Now they're engaging in a different way. So we can use those trigger points to decide how we market and generate leads. And I think, you got to have the data enrichment piece. So something like Sales Intel or Zoom Info or something, because that data gets really stale really quickly. So the contact data and enriching that content data real time is critical to any type of automated lead generation strategy.
Yeah, I really love that you were talking about automation and how technology and marketing works together. But how do you balance innovation with data privacy, security, compliance, especially in regulated industries such as healthcare and finance? Because you were already talking about that many people are just sending their data for someone else. They are sending their newsletters or forwarding for someone else. So how do you see this balance?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly certain rules, like you're supposed to get people to opt in to content, right? Difficult to do. There's obviously these list companies that you can blast. Microsoft and Google are limiting you to how much you can send out, right? So yeah, I mean, a lot of our stuff is high level, like, hey, AP automation, accounts payable automation, or contract workflow automation. And, the reality of forwarding that type of stuff, is it's not sensitive. It's not personal identifying or health information in any regard. So in the most cases, we, download a list and send it out, but we send it out in very small 100 contact name list campaigns, and then we measure the campaign. So from a data privacy perspective, from a lead gen, not, these are prospects, so they're not really, people that we're sending confidential information. So usually the security aspect's not that important, but if something bounces and you keep sending it to the bounced email, Google's gonna shut you off if you're using them for your email. So you gotta make sure you're taking the bounces and the rejections, and that's how we're judged. Is if the bounce rate is super high, they're gonna shut you down, and that's happened many a times before. But balancing it is, listen, I always balance to aggressive versus not. So I rather beg for forgiveness. Sorry, I shouldn't have sent that email. I'll take you off the list versus, trying to get everybody to double opt into lists that will never happen, and you won't be able to, certainly market to anyone at that point. So yeah, we're a bit more aggressive, I think, than most organizations.
Yeah, and also when it comes to different regions, that's also a big difference because in US you need only one-time opt-in, as far as I know, and for example here in Germany we need double opt-in.
Right.
And that's why so many times I also feel that marketing people just say, okay, not to touch the data, not to make any issues other than that. Otherwise, yeah, there's going to be whatever big GDPR issue, and then yeah, they still just don't want to put too much attention on the data, but still there are tons of data everywhere. And if someone is listening, for example, this podcast today, and sitting on this crazy amount of unstructured data, where do you think they should start to extract, or where do you think they should start to start utilizing all this data? Do you have some ideas for small steps, or just simply jump into the middle?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously that's what I do, right? I'm an architect, I'm a solutions consultant. So I consult with companies about documents and extraction and storage and all that. So, the reality is you go where the pain is. So, if you get 5 of these types of documents, probably not a good 5 a month of these documents, probably not a good use of technology to automate that, right? So you go where the volume is, you go where the labor is. So, common, horizontal solutions like accounts payable. Now in Germany and the EU, e-invoicing is very big. In the US, that's not a standard, right? Here in the US, we have health insurance, right? So we have things like HICFAs and UBO4s and these health claims and explanation of benefits, which really don't exist in, Europe and Asia. So there's certainly definitely some use cases. We always prioritize based on volume and ROI, return on investment, right? If I can't, if you don't have the volume and you don't have the labor, then I wouldn't focus on that. So you focus on things that will either, one, lower your costs, or two, drive efficiency, or ideally both. So yeah, I wouldn't say all processes are created equal. You really focus on the ones that make the biggest impact to your business. And we usually like to, when we're doing pre-sales, we want to understand what your labor rate is, what your wage burden here is. Again, that changes based on the country, certainly the region. So, if there is, 10,000 documents a month and it costs you 2 FTEs, full-time employees at, $20 an hour with a 25% wage burden. Oh, that is this much cost. We're only this much, and you can automate. And it's a math problem at that point, right? So that's usually how we approach from a pre-sales perspective, make it very financially driven.
You already mentioned some use cases. Could you please just name at least one or two, especially in the area of healthcare and finance? That would be really interesting because especially these industries are really highly regulated and the data is super sensitive.
Yeah, so VRC, one of our divisions is Vital Chart, where we do healthcare patient records. And there's obviously those are very HIPAA, which is a law here, Healthcare Interoperability Portability Accessibility Act or something, whatever it is, but it's strict. You can get fined. So we and all of our platform is essentially in AWS, Amazon. And so we basically were looking at ways to automate the return release of information. So we're getting all these unstructured letters from doctors and lawyers, if you're in an accident. So Right now, somebody takes that in and keys all the data into our vital chart solution. It was too expensive to use an off the shelf commercial model like Azure OpenAI or Claude, Anthropic. And so we basically self-host our own open source model, and we front end the vital chart interface to collect all these unstructured faxes and other medical documents and use our large language model or generative AI self-hosted model to extract all that information automatically. So there's like 13, 14 fields that get extracted that somebody would have to manually data enter. So that would now happen at like 90% automation. And then clearly the benefit of getting all that nice data is reusing that data. So we work with thousands of healthcare hospitals and facilities and clinics that have different EMR, so electronic medical records here in the US. It's a big thing. It's hard, very, very hard to integrate. So we've partnered with a tool that allows us to push that data into the clinical system. And so it's kind of an end-to-end process. The kind of third phase of that will be quality assurance, making sure using AI to basically make sure Brent's chart only has Brent's documents in it. And if Betty's documents are in Brent's, we can identify that and triage that for them. So we ensure compliance, that the chart is clean. And that's just a quick example of a healthcare type project that we've done.
You already mentioned LLMs, that you are also using so much LLMs, and we are currently seeing a wave of LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, or DeepSeek in business. And the question is, how do you use them? And also, right after another one, also that do you also share the insights back to the LLM, or do you just take the data,
the results back?
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's commercial LLMs. So you have Anthropic, you have AWS Bedrock, you have so everybody has their own like LLM at this point, and then you have the open source ones. So Meta Llama, Quen, Microsoft Phi, DeepSeek. We tend, if it's sensitive data, probably not using that, but we self-host it. So when we spin up our own server and self-host the open source model, then we're not paying token charges. So like in our case, we're capturing 40 million pages a year, and that continues to build. That cost parameter is significant. So we've chosen to self-host, which allows us to basically process with no royalties. So certainly the using LLMs, the reasoning capabilities are increasing. It was all about extraction. The more use of natural language processing to understand context. You've heard of RAG, which is you kind of need that at retrieve, augment, generation. So the ability for the LLM to go out and actually retrieve information based on the context of the prompt. Those are all really important. Now, consuming them, like I said, in this case, we stood it up on our own AWS EC2, which is like a Windows server running the actual LLM. But products like Kodak, Alaris, Info Input, where there's already like an interface, and then you just plug into the appropriate commercial model. We also use that as well. We integrate with Azure, Google, Abby, AWS. But again, each marketplace, so Azure is only going to support certain LLMs. They're not going to have AWS's LLM on Azure and vice versa, right? So depending on the models, and so I like Azure, and Azure has a leaderboard, which is like a matrix to show all the models in their model catalog and how well they perform and at what cost. So, that leaderboard and the ability to see metrics around certain LLMs wasn't even a thing a couple months ago. I almost had a company pay me $200,000 to just do a F1 and median K-mean score on a bunch of documents. Now that's just available like in this case, Azure's interface, you could just select the models you want and it will automatically do it.
And personally, what would you recommend for business leaders? How shall they use LLM outputs whenever they make their business decisions?
Yeah, I mean, so LLMs, while they're really good and they're getting better every day, they don't, when it comes to documents, they don't do great with check boxes and tabular data. And when tabular data like rolls across pages, so things like transcripts or EOBs or medical claims or invoices, there's probably better, like just general document AI, like neural models that would do better with that. But I would say ultimately you have to feed the model, right? So fine tuning is a thing. And so what you would do is, I would always start with a POC. So you start with just something like simple that you can test, because you don't know, like we're doing this healthcare vital chart integration. We don't know that the Quen model is going to do better than the Phi model, with our data set. So, being able to load a data set, fine tune it, see how much automation you can get. The more key value pairs you have, the more labels, the easier it is. The more context you can add to the particular LLM, the better output. But again, ultimately that data that we're extracting or analyzing needs to go to something. Whether if it's procurement related, it goes to accounting. If it's legal related, might go to a case management system. So the ability for us to take the data in whatever format, JSON, XML, CSV, database, and be able to push and pull that between those systems. That's really what the importance of data reuse. Because if you're going to spend a bunch of money on the LLM and get all this nice data and not get it in to your business process, there's no value.
Yeah. So if you could design the ideal experience for a company interacting with its historic data, what would that look like? Which tools would you use? You already mentioned AWS, or which experience or outcomes would you like to see actually?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's already one. Like if you're Microsoft Azure just came out with AI Foundry, which is a studio application that really allows you to do all, they call it playgrounds, right? So you basically, upload a document, ask it a question, it gives you back, and then you can give, which is a fine tuning data set, you can give it a, a set of documents and put some prompts. But so I like Azure's, the interface to Azure. I think it's easy to use. I also, AWS Textract also, while it is limited on the UI, there are custom queries, which is kind of a LLM like you build adapters. It's also really easy. It's like step 1, step 2, step 3. So it's very simplistic. I love the step approach. Like step 1, upload your documents. Step 2, what are your query prompts? Step 3, validate. Yeah. Right? I mean, make it as easy as possible. I mean, there's companies like Perplexity. You probably have heard of that, where they kind of give you, it's like Chat GPT, but you can pick any model you want. You're going to see more and more of those types of situations. There's just so many models. The model is the commodity. The UI to the model and the fine tuning is really what's neat. And that's why I think Perplexity has been so well received in the market, because it's kind of that open intelligence, pick whatever model you want and use it, right?
Yeah. And if we go forward to 2030, what's one record-related process that will completely obsolete, and what do you think will replace it?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of those, right? So anything that's repetitive, so software quality assurance, QA testing, I think is something that will go away. Anything that's a repetitive type of a business process. So you have a lot of the accountants, procurement type related things. You already see those kind of going away. The way we target customers is look on Indeed, which is a job board, looking for people that are trying to hire AP clerks. And then we go after them and say, listen, we'll automate this through technology. You won't need these people anymore. And obviously you have to have that, it's labor avoidance is the focus of us. But in some cases it's labor reallocation, meaning that you don't need that person anymore. So anything that's repetitive, we have a lot of those types of processes. We work with our customers on that, like promotional and pricing updates. So when you sell products and the SKUs price change, a lot of applications don't have an easy way to update their SKUs products with the pricing or updates and things. So, using bots and RPA to automate those types, those types of jobs will probably be, less and less. From an HR perspective, the onboarding, claims, auto claims here, insurance claims, any type of insurance claim of any kind, would be good use of automation, and those jobs likely won't exist in the future.
And last but not least, would you recommend a book, a podcast, or a quotation that shaped how you think about nowadays about innovation, data, or leadership within data?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I'm not a real book reader per se, but I would be more in line for something like somebody on LinkedIn like that posts a lot. So there's a bunch of Microsoft MVPs, most valuable players that are into what I'm into, which is Azure, AI Foundry, Power Automate, some of these cool things. So I love the story of Microsoft right now. They're coming out with some really cool stuff. So, people on LinkedIn like Mike Devaney or God, I'm trying to think of some of the guys there that do that. But I'm not a big book reader. I consume a lot of content online. The guys from Abby, I usually like the guys from Rossum, they're out of, I think, the Ukraine or over in Europe somewhere. And they're always coming out with articles around cool stuff like specialized bots, how to, use AI chat for querying data instead of using reports, things like that. But I love to just peruse LinkedIn and all the cool stuff that people post on.
Great. Brent, thank you so much for your time for today. I really enjoyed our talk. And maybe later we can also continue with the next session about how to automate workflows. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.